We're joined by legal practitioner Towo Oserujawo. Towo, you're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us, Towo. Towo, to what extent do the courts have jurisdiction over the internal affairs of political parties?
Come again with your question so that let me
I
see
asked,
if I
to what extent do the courts have jurisdictional, interference, let's say, in internal affairs of the political parties?
Generally, the court has no jurisdiction to interfere into the internal affair, to interfere into the leadership crisis of a political party, except the window is opened by any of the party breaching the structure or the laid down rules of the party. That is where the court that is where the court power comes in to look into the fact of the rules or the area of the constitution of the party that was broken, resulting to that crisis. So the court has no jurisdiction to entertain internal affairs of a political party, except to enforce the provision of the law of that political party. That is all.
So does the issue of a factional caretaker committee qualify as a justiciable matter under the Constitution? Or is it a political question when it comes to doctrine?
Well, it's not a political question. If you look at the PDP situation, it's basically not political, but legal issues that ought to be addressed if either of the party knows the appropriate issues or the appropriate matter presented before the court. Let me make one thing clear, because at the introduction of this issue, the court generally does not have power to grant relief not sought by party. But there are exceptions to that regard. When the court, in its own duty, believes that the relief sought by any of the party may not address the wrong that is being meted on that party, the court can grant relief not sought. That is where we have the omnibus clause in every application. And that was established by the Supreme Court when he handled the case of Amechi far back in 2007. And that principle has not been questioned. So then look at it for this aspect now. If you look at the PDP issue, you notice that this Court of Appeal decision is as a result of Turaki's approach of the Federal High Court, seeking to recognize the convention that has been ordered to stop by another Federal High Court. So the court, in its own wisdom, which the court was right, that convention cannot be recognized because it was done a flagrant abuse of court this thing. So if you look at it now, is it political? The answer is no. It is purely legal, because the principle of law is that no matter how bad or no matter how perceived you feel a order of court is right or wrong, or is wrong, you must abide by that rule pending when that order is set aside. So bringing politics to it is no, but for this is legal, purely.
So let's leave the players aside now, the players inside of the PDP. The appellate court also held that the lower court exceeded its jurisdiction by granting relief that was not sought by either of the parties. So I'm wondering, how does the matter of accountability now come when it comes to the matter of the court exceeding its jurisdiction?
Yeah, the issue of jurisdiction, let's get it clear to answer the question, is issue of the power, or the power which is the law giving the court giving the court that structure to entertain the matter. I stated earlier that generally, that is the general provision of the law, that the court cannot grant a relief not sought by a party. But the exception to it is that if that relief the court grant, being not sought by the party, can address the wrong, or the relief sought by the party, and the relief sought by the party cannot address the wrong done by the other party, the court can use its own power as a duty, as a matter of duty of the court, to grant other relief to pacify any of the party. But on this particular issue now, but that relief the court should grant should not exceed or overreach the other party. So if you look at it holistically, that is where accountability comes in. When the lower court goes beyond its power, it is left for the 3 wise men or the 5 wise men at the Court of Appeal to put them in check. That is accountability. So the judiciary has that in place. Then if the 5 wise men or the 3 wise men, as the case may be, based on the subject matter for the court, decide to go beyond their power, then the Supreme Court, which is the apex court of the land, the 7 wise men or the 5 wise men that may sit may decide to checkmate by giving that accountability. And that is what the Court of Appeal have stated. Yes, the Court of Appeal have stated. If you look at it, whatever issues that are being bedeviling the PDP has been laid to rest, particularly arising from the convention in Ibadan, held in November, has been laid to rest by the Supreme Court. So what the party ought to have done is to go back and reorganize as it is now. So the issue of leadership has never been dealt with by the court in question. And that is what the Court of Appeal is reinstating.
All right, so how does the court balance the principle of political party autonomy with the need to enforce legality and internal democracy?
Yeah, you know, the court, let me make one thing clear. The court we operate in Nigeria are the court of, they are blind to the society. Is what you bring into the, it's what you bring before the court adjudicates in. So it's garbage in, garbage out, or better things in, better things out. So the court can only adjudicate. And most times I tell people, if you are privileged to go through some of the processes filed, you discover that the court in his own wisdom could not be held responsible for some of the pronouncements we are having. Because if you look at it holistically, there are procedures to issues. And if those issues are not breached, irrespective of no matter you know, most times we come online, we become so fluent in English, in our argument and all those stuff. But when you look at it, argument does not win cases. Argument in court does not win cases. What wins the cases is the facts and the issues before the court. So if those things are put in place, that is where the issue is. And you look at it in one way or the other. That is where even if the Court of Appeal, if the lower court err, the Court of Appeal will decide to checkmate them. And if the Court of Appeal checkmates them, or hell, the Supreme Court will decide to also look at the issue. So there is a clear distinction. The more we get to understand what is going on in PDP, though we know the political aspect of it, but holistically, if we look at it, the legal issues in the PDP outweigh the political interference. It only feeds the political interference if it is properly addressed. I think this faction, this calling one man who I believe may not be able to have gathered such momentum would have been there.
Mr. Oseruoja, thank you very much for joining us for this conversation.